Great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today, Mary Ellen. We're really looking forward to your presentation on grants. So I'm not going to take up any more time and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Director Best. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited about talking about grant writing today because it's something that many people feel intimidated by. But if you are here today, you have worked with the Humanities Arkansas group before, and you know that they're very supportive of the grant writing process. So we're just going to give you some additional tips and strategies about applying for additional grants. We're going to look at different places to apply. We're going to look at how to maybe do a little bit of research. And then we're going to look at the fundamentals of the two biggest grant writing documents, the letter of intent and then an actual proposal. So we're just going to dive right in there today. Of course, this is Fundraising Friday. Yay! Where we like to say we put the fun in fundraising. And we are in session 6, grant writing. So if you want to review some of the previous sessions all the way back to our overview of fundraising for small nonprofits, just dive onto the YouTube channel for Humanities Arkansas. Okay, so again, we're in session 6 today. We're going to be talking about grant writing. And as always, today's goals are to really just go over the basic terms and terminology and keywords. I know we're going to go fast today. We're going to talk about a lot of things. I'm going to throw a lot at you, but that's okay because it's being recorded, and also because a copy of the PDF of all the slides will be available. And then I have 2 handouts as well that Adrian can also post with the YouTube video. My third goal for you is that you have at least 1 or 2 really big takeaways today that you can start implementing in your next grant. And we're here to have fun, put that fun in fundraising. So we're just going to relax and we're just going to take a deep dive into grant writing. So we have talked about this every session. In 2022, the last report, Giving USA, was released in June of 2023. This reported all philanthropic donations for the United States for the 2022 year. We don't have 2023 results quite yet. That report will be released in June of this year. So that will be coming up. But if you recall, right, foundations gave roughly $105 billion away in 2022, and corporations $21 billion. So these are the funds we are talking about today. Today, we're going to talk about giving from corporations, corporate foundation arms, foundations, and then local, state, and some federal funding. So some of our basic terminology that we're going to use today, we're going to talk about corporate giving, the corporate foundation. We're going to talk about foundations in general. If you want to deep dive into corporate giving and foundation giving, go back and hang out with our session 5 a little bit, where we talked all about that for a good 45 minutes. And today we're again going to laser focus in on that letter of intent, sometimes also called the letter of inquiry, LOI for short. You see that a lot. We're going to talk about what is a request for proposals. The federal government doesn't call it a request for proposal. They call it a funding opportunity announcement. So instead of LOI or RFP, they're going to say FOA. Most proposal submissions these days, 95% are done electronically, but no, on rare occasion, we still mail a few in. Most grants always have a program officer that we can reach out to. And the funding cycle is the due dates and the time of the year and the cycle that that giving entity is going to accept grant submissions. So let's talk quickly about how to search for a grant. My favorite, and this is not an endorsement, it's just my favorite tool, is Candid. Candid used to be part of the foundation. It used to be the Foundation Center, and they merged, and they have become Candid. They have 2 levels. You can have a free account, and then you can subscribe, and there is a fee involved. So let's just talk about all the opportunities through the free account, because we're all about small nonprofits doing great work at a low cost. So this is simply how you sign up for a free account. You just put in your organizational email address and a password, and then you have access to a lot of their free screening and free training materials. Again, this is Candid. And here, oh, I forgot the slide here. I'm sorry. My little Zoom tools are over my little bullet points over here. This is a paid database that I really use a lot. I think it has the best grant searching tools out there. It is quite expensive for a small nonprofit. However, most local libraries have a subscription. Most universities have a subscription and most local libraries. So I do believe here in Central Arkansas, CALS has a subscription to this, and so does UA Little Rock and University of Central Arkansas. So a lot of the big schools have subscriptions. And as my husband pointed out earlier today, sometimes if you're a member of the Alumni Association and your alma mater, you get library privileges. Wink, wink. And that's a win-win because you support your campus alumni association and you get library privileges. So no, that's an option. However, at libraries, it's not going to be called Candid. It's going to most likely be in their database under this name, Foundation Directory Online, right? Foundation Directory Online. So when you search their databases, you're going to search through the F's here. The F's here. I know that's a little confusing. Okay, so this is what a foundation funding or a proposal funding search looks like. We put in our topic, I put in Arkansas history, and it's going to do searching over the last couple of years, what grants have been given that have been tagged Arkansas history. So you can see roughly we have 1,500 different grant makers who have participated in funding under something related to Arkansas history, roughly 13,000 grants, almost 800 recipients. And of course, we can look at everyone's 990 when it's out, the foundation's 990. So this lets you know some of these foundations that have been giving to Arkansas history, right? We have the Community Foundation here. We have the Walmart Foundation, Fidelity Investments Charitable Gift Fund. We have the Walton Family Foundation and the Wingate Foundation. Most of us are familiar with some of those top givers. And then this is just, if we scroll down on the page, you can see who is the grant maker, who's the recipient, right? Where's the recipient located? And then the primary subject is a little vague here, but they have something to do with Arkansas history. That's why they appeared in the search. And then you can see the year the gift was made, that they received this grant. I pulled this up so you can see who are some of the people getting these grants. We have Main Street Dumas Inc., right? We have the Single Parent Scholarship Fund from Crawford and Franklin and Sebastian counties. You have the Fort Smith Streetcar Restoration Association. We have the Union County Gift Foundation and even the Heritage House Museum of, I think this is Monticello. So you can see that our Arkansas friends in the nonprofit world are recipients of these grants, and you can see the amount. You can dive into these and actually get a little bit more information about that if you want. And then one thing that Candid does through this database that I really like is they do give you foundation profiles. So again, this is the subscription service. You don't get the foundation profile for free, but if you go through your local library, you will get the paid services, and one is the foundation profile. So if you want to take a deeper dive into one particular foundation, you can. Now, if you don't have the paid subscription, you're just doing the free search, you won't be able to get that foundation profile, but you can still find every foundation 990 online. And as we talked about last session, the 990 is a wealth of powerful information for us, but it can seem overwhelming. I mean, I'm going to admit this. Sometimes a 990 can, you're like, what do I look at? So just some key sections to look at. Section 15 always has some application information about how and when to apply, right? How and when to apply. You can also look at their listing of awards. Each 990 tells you who they've been giving to and for how much in this year, right? So we know that, I think this is actually the Murphy Foundation. You can see they gave to the Arts Center, they gave to Arkansas Children's Hospital, they gave to the Fashion Forum and Arkansas Coalition for the Marshallese, and so forth. So you can actually see the grants that they gave to these different institutions and in general, the purpose. So now let's talk about writing letters of intent, right? I'm a fan of Abbott Elementary, so here's a inspirational gift to help us along the way. So what is a letter of intent or a letter of inquiry? Always called the LOI. It is basically a letter, usually one page, right? Two at the very, very most, never ever over 2 pages. I would even recommend if you can keep it to 1 page, that's even better. But it is basically a brief outline of a program, its funding needs that's sent to the fundee, right? So the foundation or the corporation is, and even, right, our good friends at Humanities Arkansas have a letter of intent application online. And it helps the funder determine if they're going to be interested in that project. So it's a step before submitting a full proposal. So again, we're going to go back to our friends at Candid. What should be included in the letter of inquiry? Again, Candid in their free Candid Learning Resources knowledge base has a lot of really best practice standards listed. It is my favorite go-to. And they talk about the main 6 sections of the letter of intent, right? The introduction, the organization description, the statement of need, the methodology, other funding sources that you might have with the project, and the final summary, right? This is the basic 6 sections that you want to have in your letter of intent. On the PDFs that you access, this link is live, so you can actually go to this website and you can see it. And really, it breaks this down for us as grant writers, right? So in our introduction, we want to include the name of our organization, the amount we're requesting, a quick 1-sentence description of the project, and here maybe any qualifications of the key staff, that quick introduction to the project, a little bit of background information, our organization description, maybe our mission statement, a very brief history of our organization and our current projects. And here's a great opportunity for us to show a clear connection between what we're doing now and then what we want to do with this requested possible funding through this letter of intent. Of course, it's going to have a statement of need. You're going to want to, in a sense, convince the reader that your project meets an existing need, right? So you might want to describe your target population, who you're going to serve, where are they, add in appropriate statistical information and data if you can. And you want to have like an example of the need too. That's really helpful. The methodology is going to be about your project, right? You want it to be clear, logical, and you want to explain some sort of solution to the problem you're addressing in the need here. Right? And then I would say this is probably the largest part of the letter. This might be a full paragraph, right? Maybe 1 full paragraph right here in the methodology. Then in our wrap up, we're going to talk about, are we approaching any other possible funders for this project? And of course, we're going to have our final summary. So those are the 6 methods. In this Candid knowledge base, they have examples. They have example letters of inquiry that you can see that have been very effective. So you could use these also as a model. There's no need to reinvent the wheel for a strong letter of intent. Each one of these examples has all 6 of these key parts. So for your letter of intent, you want to make sure you have all 6 parts. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about, sometimes funders put out RFPs. And an RFP is simply an announcement or a document from the funder saying, hey, we're accepting applications for this purpose. And so as small nonprofits, as mid-sized nonprofits, we can read these RFPs and decide, do we want to apply? So here's an example. Now this is for hunger, but it's a really good example that I found of an RFP online. Most RFPs now, I would say probably about 95% are going to be online, maybe 98. So you go to the website of the funder and you read their announcement. They're going to give you all of the details. What are the program's objectives? What's the funding available, and so forth. They're going to also give you general information about the funding cycle, when to apply, when is the due date, when's the review period, when will they have their announcements. And then they're going to give you general advice Here's some eligibility criteria. You want to make sure you meet that eligibility criteria before you fill out the letter of intent information. I apologize, before you fill out this request for proposal information. And then notice the application instructions are right online. And we click this button and begin our application. I want to draw your attention right here, though. I'm going to actually even draw a little line. Right here is the program officer, right? Remember, we talked about that as a key term. A program officer is someone at the funder who can talk to us and answer questions prior to applying about the application. 90% or more of requests for proposals or proposal announcements in general online do have a program officer contact listed. So always, always, always remember that's a fantastic resource for us as grant writers. Now, let's imagine our letter of intent that we sent off 3 months later is sent back to us and it's accepted, and we are now allowed to submit a full proposal. So the full proposal is this written application, typically accompanied by supporting documents like our 501c3 status, maybe our annual budget, maybe a list of our board members, submitted to the foundation, corporate giving program, or even government agency that's requesting a grant. So we talked a little bit about corporate and foundation funding proposals, but I want to spend just a few minutes talking about some local, state, and federal opportunities, because these are a little different and a little hard to find. So for example, local funding, here's the website from the city of Little Rock, right? Their funding opportunities website. You pretty much have to Google this based on your city or your county or your region. This is Arkansas State Funding Opportunities. This is the Arkansas Department of Heritage, but there's also funding through many different organizations, the Department of Tourism, Department of Education, the Department of Health and Social Services, for example. But I thought since we were humanities organizations, this would probably be the most applicable to us. For example, here's information about their small museum grant through the Arkansas Department of Heritage. Here's something for National History Day travel. Here's something about the Arkansas Cultural Institutions, right? Trust Fund, and so forth. So these just give you some ideas. Again, we find these mostly by Googling. And then federal grants, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about federal grants, of course. The National Endowment for the Humanities is the federal grant funding opportunity that we probably work most with, since we are humanities nonprofits. But this is simply grants.gov. This is how we search for federal funding opportunities. It can be overwhelming to search for federal funding opportunities. So I suggest you turn to their helpful how-to website. So this is their community blog, but if you Google grants.gov helpful how-tos, this community blog shows up. And they literally have all these different steps about how to be eligible, how to even write a basic grant for them, how to apply, and so forth. So this is really, really helpful. It takes you step by step. Step one, make sure you have a free account on grants.gov, right? So they're going to take you through all those steps. And then this is what the search engine looks like. Now, again, I did History Museum just to see what came up, and we found roughly 605 posted applications in the federal system that mentions something about history and museums, right? Forecasted means it's coming up in the future. Posted means it's accepting applications right now. So you'll see, for example, this one, museum operations. It is due, it was posted on the 11th, and the due date is, we've got just a few days. We've got 7 days to get this baby in. Not enough time for a federal grant. But here's one that maybe is might help us, right? The National Criminal History Improvement Program. So if we're doing work in social justice and so forth, this might be something for us. Notice we have a little bit more time for that. And then, though this one isn't applicable for us, this history of screenable disorders, Notice sometimes the close date is almost a year away, right? Close date is January 2025. So we want to look at these ahead of time. Oh, and this is one of my handouts. The keyword that you put in the search criteria up here, right? So this keyword is really what makes a difference. I'm just going to bring out my little laser pointer here. This keyword section right here helps you find the grant. So what you put in this keyword criteria search is what's going to impact the results you get. So grants.gov has a great handout about how to best use this keyword search engine. And that is one of the PDFs that I have to share with you today. So let's imagine we get this, we find something we're interested in. This is a grant notice, right, for a public impact at smaller organizations, right? Notice this is due June of 2024. So we have a little over 6 weeks. That's a possibility. The average grant here is going to be about $25,000. It's going to be somewhere between $1,000 and $25,000. And they have a total of 750,000 grants to give away, right? They have an average of 30 awards. So, right, you can kind of do the math there. If they average, they're going to do 30 awards out of $750,000. That means the average grant is, and I can't do that in my head. Jim, I'm going to rely on you for that one. I'm teasing because that is quick math. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. That is roughly $25,000 a grant. So the average funding is going to be $25,000 for this. So let's see how we're doing on time. We have enough time to take a quick dive into these. So I'm just going to pull this up. And if one of our Zoom participants can just give me a thumbs up, did it switch over to the website? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so this is now the website for this grant opportunity. We can see that this is the synopsis. This is where we want to start. This is the general information. We want to check this out. We want to check our eligibility. Are we eligible? Are we all nonprofits that have a 501c3 status? Boom, we are. So we are eligible. You want to look at this additional information. And then here is my favorite, right? This takes us to the actual grant application page, which is where we're going to go next. And again, we'll just do a quick thumbs up. Did it switch over? Fantastic. So now we're in, if you notice, that link took us to the NEH itself, the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is all of the information about these public impact projects at for smaller organizations like all of us are. Again, the grant snapshot is here. The prepared a performance up to 2 years, right? The start date, this project would start March of 2025. So we're thinking not this year, but next year, right? So we're going to use this money, right? We're going to start this project that we're planning now between March 2025 and May. That's going to be the start date. And we will find out in December of 2024 if we have been awarded this grant, right? And then it gives you some general information. And then they give us 5 tips to success. And here's why I'm scrolling down here, because there's some key things that I want us to focus on as we scroll down. Notice they had a webinar. Now it has passed, but most federal opportunities like this have a live webinar that you can attend and engage. They're usually via Teams or Zoom, and you can discuss directly with the program officers this opportunity. They give you pretty much success for, tips for success. It is absolutely always worth going. If you can't make it or you missed it, because let's say we just found out this grant today, they typically do list the slides. So here's the slides, and they usually do post the video. Just notice here, they're having a little delay, so they're going to have it up within the next week or so. And then they're going to give us information about the review. This is going to be the application materials that we need. List of recent awards, so we can say who they've been giving to recently. And then, right, here's some great program statistics. On average, they have 110 applications. This grant has a 25% success ratio. And then in general, they're giving 28 to 30 awards, which is what it said. But notice again, here, my favorite thing up here is it's going to tell us who we can contact, right? We can contact the program officer to ask any questions after we have looked at all of this material or after we have watched the live webinar footage. So know all of those things are just really incredibly helpful for us as grant writers to determine, is this an application we want to apply for, right? Do we want to apply for this application? Okay, so, and just one more thumbs up. Did we get back to our PowerPoint? Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna just close these windows just so my Wi-Fi works even better. Okay, so we talked a little about the NEH, right? And then, of course, I want to give a special celebration to our friends here at Humanities Arkansas. Notice their main website, as many of us have been to. You can, of course, always look at their programs, their grants, their upcoming events like these webinars. And then, of course, information. This toolbar is really helpful here too. Right? You can search here. As we search, they give us all of their upcoming grants, and they look at all the information we have here, what they fund, what we don't fund. And if we click on each one of these little links, we get a detailed description of that grant project. In a sense, it's not, in a sense, it's like a request for a proposal. They're saying, hey, this is the grant we have open right now. And it tells you their grant cycle right here, right? So it tells us everything we need to know to apply. So here's some of their grants. Gives us some information about what can we apply for right now. And I do want to emphasize one of, I think, that I can celebrate about our Humanities Arkansas group here is they're incredibly helpful. There's always someone to reach out to and ask a question. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to someone. They will guide you through any problems or confusion that you're having. So let's talk now about how to write a large grant proposal. And here's my tagline: stay sane, right? We're going to stay sane, right? We're going to imagine, for the sake, most grant proposals now have an online submission program that then they give us the prompts and we fill out those fields. Some still do not. Some we still have to, in a sense, create the proposal ourselves. So what we're going to talk about today is the basic elements of a grant proposal. And typically when it's online, they have all of these elements included. They're the most common 8 elements of every grant proposal. But if there is no online application and you have to send it in yourself, I would suggest you follow these steps. So what is a proposal? It's simply our written application, again, often accompanied by supporting documents that we submit to the foundation, the corporate giving program, the government agency that requests a grant. That's our proposal. And in general, there are 8 main sections of a grant proposal. And these are typically, I'd say 99% of the time, included on those online applications as well, that many foundations and our local, state, and federal agency is also going to have us apply online, right? They pretty much have all these sections. So we always have an organizational history and mission section. We have an abstract, or sometimes called the executive summary section. We always, again, similar to the letter of intent, we have a statement of need. We have a project description. Different from the letter of intent, building on that letter of intent, we have a goals and objectives section. Again, different from the letter of intent, we're going to have to provide a detailed budget of the money that we're requesting and how we will use it. A budget narrative describes the information on the budget, since the budget is typically a spreadsheet. And then, of course, most people require documentation and attachments like our 501c3 paperwork, right? We typically have to always upload that 501c3 information. Sometimes they also require things like your most recent audit. That's a good example. So what is included when you write your organizational history? The basic facts, right? The basic paragraph or 2 paragraphs about the history of your nonprofit. We want to include when we were founded, how we developed, maybe did we have any key moments of expansion in our nonprofit? We want to maybe list a track record of our successes and our accomplishments, maybe even a track record of our nonprofit leadership. The key about our organizational history is we want to show that we have capacity to do the work, and we have a reputation of credibility to do this work, right? We have both of those things, capacity and credibility. And of course, we want to demonstrate that we are committed to achieving success as a nonprofit. Sometimes this is also where you put your mission statement, right? Our mission statement. Then it's going to ask typically for item number 2, an executive summary or an abstract. So an executive summary is something really brief, right? So it's really brief. It has a punch. Everyone here, indulge me for a minute. So give me the punch. I'm going to wait for you. I'm going to wait for you out there in video land. Give me the punch. Okay, right? For your abstract or executive summary, I want you to think brief, to the point, that punch. I want you to think an elevator speech. You're going up in the elevator with someone. Here's a really good example. Your project name seeks to do what? For how many people and what demographic? Where? And then funding for what? What are you going to do? Right? And you want to keep this to 3 or 4 sentences. In a sense, that elevator speech. You want to keep the abstract or the executive summary very concise, very clear, and very to the point. And you want this to be super strong, right? As Mark Twain said, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. It is harder to be concise and to be clear and to be short. But this is so key because sometimes at the first round, this is what people are going to see first. They're going to see this executive summary first, and you want this to be very sharp, very well written. So practice this section 3 or 4 times, give it to a bunch of people, have them, after reading your abstract, repeat it back to you to make sure you as the writer are communicating the purpose of your grant. You will be on track if you do that. Okay, so now we're on to the statement of need. This is, in a sense, the problem. What problem or what gap is your project going to fulfill? What problem are you going to solve? What need is there? What is the need, right? This isn't the how yet. This is just the statement. Why? What's the problem? What's the need? That's what we're going to demonstrate in this section. So you're going to want to explain why now. Why is there some sort of urgency or timeline for this project now? You want to think of the window of opportunity, short-term versus a long-term need, right? If you have a short-term need for this project, let's say you're trying to capture oral histories and the people are in their late 70s and 80s, that is a short-term need, right? Versus a long-term need that you're doing a project maybe over that's going to be part of your mission for many, many years. You, of course, want to, if you can, include any current events that are going on locally, regionally, nationally that create or impact this need. And I really want to encourage you to use statistics, data, demographic data, public opinion data to demonstrate the need, right? This is very powerful. Statistics are very powerful in demonstrating need, right? Demonstrating very, very powerful. Okay, and now, right, our next section of the main grant is the project description. Candid describes this as, this is the story of how we're solving the problem. So the statement of need talked about the problem. Now our project description is everything the funder needs to know about the program and the story of how we're going to solve this problem. So this is where you want to think of those 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the project. Who's going to be doing it? What are we going to do? Where's it going to occur? When is it going to occur? Why are we doing this? And how, right? And we want to really, at this moment, if we can, seize upon this intersection between the mission of our organization and the goals of this grant opportunity. Right? That's when we want to seize, and if we can't find synergy of these, this is a great place to put that in our application. Here are some general tips that I have kind of learned the hard way and grant writing, but in general, in this project description section, you want to document all of your source information. Put the name of the source and the year. Right? It doesn't have to, you don't have to use fancy APA or, other kind of documentation styles, but you have to let the reader know where you got the source information. It builds up your credibility. If you say there 67% of community members say they want to know more about the region's history. Wow, I wish that was 67%, right? You want to document that statistic so they know, right? It's a credible statistic. We want to avoid jargon. We want to explain any acronyms. I have to admit, this is one thing that I work with a lot of people who have struggling proposals. Their application is buried in acronyms. Sometimes academics, especially, we're bad at this. We rely on a lot of acronyms. We want to explain any acronyms. This is avoiding jargon and explain acronyms is all about audience awareness. Who is going to be reading this proposal? So for example, if you're sending this off to the NEH and you know a group of humanities scholars are going to be evaluating it, you can have more discipline specific or maybe more academic language. But if you're sending this to, let's say, a local foundation, and they're going to have, in a sense, program officers and foundation employees reading this and board members, this is the moment when you want to avoid the jargon, avoid the acronyms, so you can communicate as clear and directly to your audience who's going to be reading your grant application. Of course, you want to spell check. And here's just 2 writing tips in general for grants overall. We want to avoid passive voice. We want to stay active, right? We want to stay active. And sometimes we keep talking about the project. And technically the project is, can be passive, right? Can be passive voice. An example of passive voice, the bill passed through Congress. Well, technically a bill can't do any action. It's an inanimate object. So technically it's Congress passed the bill. That would be active voice. I always use that example to understand when I'm using passive voice, when I'm using active voice. And my other writing tip is we want to avoid the conditional tense. We don't want to say this would do this, this could do that, this might do that. You want to go straight to what will happen, right? We do this, this will happen on this date. We want to stay with that will language, avoiding the conditional tense. That just adds a little bit more subtle power to your application. This is the section most people, I'm going to say, suffer through. Goals and objectives, right, are the story of how lives are going to be changed, right? How lives are going to be changed. But when most of us have to write goals versus objectives, we're like this poor little puppy here. Like this poor little black lab. He's confused. He didn't know what's a goal. He didn't know what's an objective. He's just like, please don't help me here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take the fear out of your eyes right now and talking about what are objectives, what are goals. In fact, if you're here live, you can give me an emoji thumbs up if you've been traumatized by the difference between goals versus objectives, because so many of us have. And I'm going to turn even to a great source that I love. It's this great source that I really like. I'm sorry, hold on one second. My Zoom tools have covered my bottom and last slide here. We guys just got to move those Zoom tools. Apologize. So this is from, right, an institutional advancement office. I thought it just so clearly explains the difference between goals and objectives. We're going to use their language. So what is a goal? A goal is a broad statement of what we wish to accomplish. Remember, goals are broad, general, intangible, and abstract. Look here, we've got little, this is Loaf and Timmy here, right? Timmy, he's like looking up at the stars. It's intangible. It's the abstract, right? A goal is really about the final impact, right? Or the final outcome you want to have with this project, right? And ideally, your goals want to address the need we've talked about in our statement. We want to educate people on hidden or missing Arkansas history, right? Again, that's abstract, that's intangible, that's our goal. We want to use words. I love this section right here. Decrease, deliver, develop, establish, improve, increase, produce, provide. Very active words for our goals, right? So we want to, again, summarize the long-term expectation of what should happen as a result of your project. So here's an example for dental school, because this is what the educational institution gave us. Fewer students will miss school due to oral health issues. That's the goal of this dental health care clinic grant, right? We're being abstract. So now let's move on to what's an objective, right? So remember the goal, we're looking up at the stars. We're planning the big bright future. Now let's talk about the difference between goals and objectives. So remember, a goal is that broad statement. In contrast, an objective is a step toward accomplishing that goal, right? In contrast to the goal, an objective is narrow, precise, tangible, right? You can feel it, you can touch it, you can see it, you can hear it. It's concrete, and so importantly, it can be measured, right? So here we're lofty, we're pie in the sky, but when we're down to objectives, we're looking for, right, accomplishing something. Did Timmy and Loaf get to the other end of the shore? Right, that's what we want to know. We're on our way. Did we get across that river, right? So think of them here. We're on our way. We can measure, did we arrive? How long did it take us to get there? What obstacles did we face along the way? What time did we get there? Who traveled with us? All that wonderful stuff, right? It's all measurable. So again, your objectives, you want to be measurable. In general, you want somewhere between 1 and 3 objectives. Don't use more than 3. That's just my personal guideline, because you have to measure these objectives. You can have more if you have a very complex multi-year project, but in general, I think people overstate and overpromise in objectives, and that's something we don't want to do here, right? So we want to describe how and when not only we will complete the objective, but how will we assess that we completed it, right? So an example of an objective is by August 2019, 65% of children served in our after-school program will have completed an oral risk assessment. That's the objective. Because remember, the goal was fewer students will miss school due to oral health issues. So one way we're going to measure that is by a date and a percentage of the participants have accomplished something, right? And how are they going to measure it? They're going to give a oral risk assessment during their dental day activity to the total number of our students in the after school program, right? So, right, keep thinking through the differences again between goals that are lofty, right? Goals that are lofty. Think of the stars in the sky here versus objectives, right? Something tangible, something you can measure. Did we get across the river in our little rowboat? Yes, we did. How long did it take us? So forth, right? That would be measurable. Remember, each objective you want to be measurable. You cannot measurable and intangible. That's why a goal is difficult to measure. That's why we move toward objectives, because they are the steps that we take to reach that big picture, right? The steps that we take to reach that big picture. You can also use the SMART system. This is really good. All objectives must be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Time-bound. So again, you want to state your objectives in quantifiable terms, measurable terms. You want to state your objective in terms of outcomes, not process. So not, you don't want to talk about the process of doing something, right? You don't want to go into detail about creating the survey, right? You just want to talk about the outcomes. How many students took the survey during the after school program, right? You want them to specify the result of an activity. You have a new exhibit. How many people attended that exhibit, right? What are the demographics of the people who attended that exhibit, and so forth. You want to identify objectives about your target audience or your community. Maybe that's what we talked about in our statement of need, right? Who was or even in our elevator speech. Remember what region, what demographic, that population, that targeted population. We could have an objective that measures that. And again, You want your objectives to be realistic. Realistic, and here's the key, capable of being accomplished within the grant period. Capable of being accomplished within that grant period. Here's just some good overall tips for writing goals and objectives. You want to tie your goals and objectives to that statement of need, right? We want to include that and make it connect up to our target population. We want to give ourselves an appropriate amount of time to accomplish the objectives. Again, we don't want to confuse our outcome, our objective, for the method that we're going to use to measure that. We don't want to, right? An outcome is not creating the survey. An outcome is delivering the survey and what percentage of people completed the survey, right? And again, we don't if you want, you can add budget information. You can add a budget detail in here, budget line item to help you with your evaluation. If you want to bring someone in, if you have printing costs, what costs are going to be related to your evaluation? If you're going to have focus groups to do more of, instead of a quantitative evaluation, you're going to do a qualitative evaluation of your project, and you're going to bring in a focus group, you might need to hire someone to perform that focus group. So let's talk about the budget, the big B, in our last 10 minutes. This is a really challenging area. In general, here's a basic budget, right? And what I want to draw your attention to in this budget is the first thing we have is our expenses. Then we have, okay, are we getting any other funders who are participating in this? Is the project going to bring in any income? This is not a budget for your organization. This is just a budget for the project. Okay, so remember, this is not a budget for your entire organization, just a budget for the project. And these are things you can think about: salaries, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, printing, utilities, postage, rent, maintenance, the evaluation, marketing, other. I'm going to tell you, I love the other category. I put a lot of stuff in other, but it doesn't fit up in here, and so forth. So this is my second handout that I have for you. This is so I have this in a PDF just for you to look at. And again, I got this from a wonderful seminar from Candid, right? This video right here, what do funders look for in proposal budgets? That's the video that explains this chart. Okay, some secrets to writing a really good budget. You want to always include hidden costs as well, things like fringe benefits. So if you're going to hire a new staff person with this grant, what's the cost of their insurance, their vacation time, etc., all the fringe benefits for that employee. You want to think about printing costs, mailing costs if you need to mail or ship anything. Here's my tip. You want to think about taxes. Remember, as Arkansas nonprofits, we are not exempt from sales tax on the state and local level. We are not. So one mistake I see a lot of nonprofits do is they do not add in that 6.5% state tax on any purchased items. You're going to purchase a computer and it's going to cost $1,500. You then also need to think about that 6.5% state sales tax that almost all Arkansas nonprofits still must pay. You can think about professional development. Think about some indirect costs, sometimes additional utility costs, if you have to rent additional space, if you have to hire additional security, those kind of things. And then, of course, you want to use real dollar amounts in your equipment costs. So if you're going to say, I'm going to buy a computer, Google, find a computer. If you say, I need to buy new stanchions to help with crowd flow, you want to find out how much is that system of stanchions going to cost you, and so forth. And then I documented it. I screenshot. Every time I price a piece of equipment, I screenshot it. So I have a backup of that is a legitimate, real expense. And then, of course, I add on that tax. Wink, wink. Don't forget about that taxes. That's one of my secret tips. Because you don't want to buy, let's say, $10,000 worth of equipment and then have your organization have to pay the roughly $650 additional amount of state sales tax, and you didn't budget for it. Ooh, that sometimes can be a setback. So always remember that hidden expense of Arkansas sales tax. I love this Candid video. It is an hour long, but it is an hour well worth your time. It's called Introduction to Project Budgets. I have learned a lot from this video, and I don't work for Candid. I'm not affiliated with them anyway. I have a free account. This is a fantastic video that I, through my experience, learned a lot from. So now that we have done our budget, because our budget's going to be the spreadsheet, right? We're going to have the spreadsheet. So now we've got to describe those elements in the budget narrative. So the budget narrative is simply a narrative explanation in sentence form of what that budget line is doing. I am buying one Dell computer at $1,500 to provide clients database security. Okay? And I always say it must match the budget line in the chart or spreadsheet exactly. And you want to go down line by line. So you want to take every line of the spreadsheet and have a narrative sentence there. I have included things I'm not doing. Like if I have no fringe benefits, I will just say there are no fringe benefits a part of this application. I literally do every single one line by line. So the reviewer can see it, but that's the key, that they must be parallel in terms of your technical writing skills. So as you list things in your spreadsheet, that's the order in which you list things on your budget narrative. You want it to be as clear as possible to the grant reviewer. This is also a wonderful tip from our friends at Candid. They say, in addition to everything we just talked about in terms of grant writing, think of all of those elements, but through the lens of storytelling. So your need statement is really a story of why our organization exists. What problems are we trying to solve? The program description is the story of how we're trying to solve a problem. The outcome and evaluation is really the story of how we are changing lives. The budget is how you're going to spend the money. It's the story of the money, right? It's your story, but supported by the budget. How is that budget supporting your story? And again, be audience aware, right? That's my one big tip, be audience aware. If you have a technical audience, then you can include more technical information. If you have more of a lay audience or a board that is from many, many different parts of the community in many different fields, you want to not get trapped in discipline-specific jargon. You want to be audience aware. You want to appeal to your audience. And of course, most of us as people were engaged through stories. So we want to keep that storytelling feature at the front of our mind when we write our grants. We're almost done. Some general writing advice. You want to proofread twice and then ask your colleague to proofread for you. Key. You want to be on time. You want to be on time, right? If for some reason you know you're not going to be on time, you need to reach out to a program officer ahead of time. Some foundations will give you an extension, but that's very, 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 very rare. Most will say, I understand, our next cycle starts in 6 months, right? So be aware of those due dates. We want to follow all directions. We want to follow all directions. Sometimes we disqualify ourselves accidentally by not following the directions. So we want to be very mindful of the directions on the application. Again, we want to document all facts and statistics and data with sources. To say, according to Pew, according to Newsweek, right? According to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, according to, the Log Cabin Conway newspaper, so forth, right? We want to document all of our facts and statistics. Even you can use our local news channels as backing up and documenting. If they have a news story on your issue, right? Then you can document that too. We want to be careful not to overpromise, right? We don't want to make promises that we can't reasonably achieve within the grant period. It's better to underpromise and exceed expectations than overpromise and fail to meet the basic expectations of the funder. Again, of course, we want to budget for all expenses, especially those hidden expenses that we talked about. Always know about compliance and reporting. How are you going to have to, after the grant is over, document all of your grant activity and financial activity? And then just a few quick technical writing tips. Don't ever write irregardless. It's not a word. It's regardless. Irregardless is a combination of irregular and regardless. So just remember, it's just regardless. And here's a very common mistake I see. It's not fiscal year, right? It's fiscal year. FISCAL. So be mindful of these most common errors I see in grant applications. And then some tips for success, always, especially with a government grant or a federal or state or city grant. Sometimes they are more work, right? So you always want to start early. You want to share ideas with peers. With peers. You want to maybe discuss the idea with those program officers that the grants typically mention. You want to tailor the language of your grant to the sponsors or the grant's priorities or agenda. You don't want to tailor the project. You want to tailor the language. So if, for example, you're writing about oral histories and the project is calling them oral histories, but you have a tendency to call them, you're capturing community voices. You want to use the language of the grant application oral histories. That would be a good example. Again, we want to follow all guidelines. If they say name your document this, that's attached, you want to make sure you have your document named exactly how they list it in their guidelines. You want to do the best you can to organize your proposal carefully, to write clearly and concisely, to triple check your budget. I'll tell you, budgets are hard for me. I struggle on that the most, right? So do your best on your budget. Make sure all the numbers add up. And then if you're going to include a partnership with your grant, you want to make sure you start early with that partnership. Back up to our first tip, success. You start early so you can have those letters of approval or letters of support in time for the submission. Okay, right? Our few takeaways, remember, we have all the handouts and PDF of the slides for you. Again, our goal today was for you just to know the basics, to know that if you can write an email, you can write a grant, right? We want to keep the fun in this fundraising. And of course, we want you to join us next time when we go to number 7 in our fundraising series for small to medium-sized humanities nonprofits here in Arkansas. We're going to talk about capital campaigns, and I'm going to give you some really good secret tips about vision, right? And planning for capital campaigns. We're going to talk about what makes a successful capital campaign. How long are they? How do you set your goals? How do you document progress in terms of accounting towards your campaign? All of that good stuff, including what kind of campaign gifts we are going to accept, all that good stuff. And then last but not least, we're going to end up with building strong fundraising boards, because all 7 of these elements above really can best be supported by having a strong fundraising board. So we are ending our session right now. Thank you guys so much. We have a little bit, we're just about out of time for our lunch and learn because we went into a little bit of depth on writing grants, but I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to hang out for a little extra time if anyone has any questions. And I think Adrian's going to stop the video, but thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you next time. And then I'll be here for questions.
Thanks so much, Mary Ellen. That was some excellent, excellent information. Really was. And you touched on so many things that a lot of people who've never written grants before become anxious about. And this really does help a lot. And one other thing I just like to add to what you said, that some grant funding agencies or foundations, if they offer you an opportunity to submit a draft of your proposal, I highly recommend you take them up on that, because that really will make a huge difference for you. Because a lot of people don't do that, but it really gives you a lot of insight, and it helps you grow as a grant writer. And also it helps to give your application what it needs to make it more competitive. So we offer that service. So Do
Oh,
take,
Jama, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Adrian, keep that in the video because that was such an important point, Jama. Yes. And I will say, um, program officers are very generous in doing that. When it has that opportunity, you learn so much, especially stating they'll give you advice about your goals. They'll give you advice about your objective. They'll give you advice about what's missing from your project description. And so forth. They will give you advice on, did you have the wrong attachments? It is really helpful. Sometimes they give you big picture advice, which will help you shape the project. And of course, sometimes it's detail advice. Maybe your budget's not adding up. Maybe you put something on your budget that seems a little confusing or you didn't explain it well in the narrative. Like you just say, $11,000 is going to be used for printing. That's your budget narrative. Well, that's a lot of money for printing. So what are you printing, right? That's what's coming to my mind. Well, what are you printing for that $11,000? So, right. So, excellent. Yes. Excellent point, Gemma. I'm so glad you brought that up. That has helped me as a grant writer. Right. I will say, if I have that opportunity, it helps me more than any other step is when I can have a program officer from the funding agency review it. That helps more than any other step. The challenge sometimes we have as small nonprofits is we're running behind because we're wearing many hats. And to have it reviewed, you have to have it done early. So that goes back to that number one tip, start early. So if a grant is due, I'm going to say if a grant is due in August, now is the time to start, right? Give yourself a lot of time. And that way, because if a program officer is going to review their grant, they might want to see it by July 1st. When it has an August deadline. So you need to be working now in May and June to get that proposal ready. And if you notice, most grant application periods open 3 to 6 months before the grant is due for this very reason, So excellent point, Jama. I'm going to have to add a slide and call it the Jama Best slide because that was a huge tip.
well, thanks again, Mary Ellen, as always.
Wow.
It was fantastic information, and we appreciate you greatly. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a great day. I appreciate you all.
You
See you next
too.
time.
Yes, ma'am.
Capital campaigns, the big CC.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.